As time goes by, the difficulty in keeping aging hardware in usable service becomes more apparent. We can only expect our devices and equipment to run so long on the stock hardware that came with it. But depending on what type of hardware you have, you may not have the option to replace components to keep your devices running. Take this original Xbox console for example. Microsoft only designed it to accept the hardware they wanted in the console. If you need to replace the optical drive or the hard drive, well, you're out of luck. Or are you? You see, while Microsoft never intended for their customers to modify or tinker with their Xbox consoles like they would, say, a custom-built computer, with a few tools, some homebrew software, basic soldering skills, and in my case, exercise and patience, you too can take an ordinary stock original Xbox and not only add functionality like being able to copy your entire Xbox library to more modern storage solutions, but basically keep it from the inevitable fate of a failed hard drive, which would ultimately mean game over for your Xbox. Let me show you what I mean. Now keep in mind, I wouldn't call this a tutorial video. In fact, I stopped filming halfway through because of the frustration I had with trying to figure out what I was doing. So part of the video is going to be whatever media I thought to capture from my phone. If you're serious about modding an Xbox, there are plenty of more qualified people than myself who can show you in their videos. So introductions out of the way, let's get to the Xbox. Before I cracked open the console, I felt it necessary to give the outside a nice scrub down with a rag and some multi-surface cleaner. For these air vents, some cotton swabs and isopropyl alcohol will get the job done nicely. After a basic cleaning, it's time to take a look inside the Xbox and see what we've got. I've already opened the console before filming to make sure the infamous clock capacitor wasn't leaking, and thankfully it wasn't. But that didn't mean we were just going to leave it as is. But we'll get to that later. Right now it's important to see if the console itself is fully working. Opening the unit, we're greeted to a fine layer of dust on the disk drive and the stock hard drive. Not only dust, but specks of rust as well. I got this Xbox at a thrift store, so I have no idea of its previous owner or where they ended up storing it. But liquid must have found its way inside due to the amount of rust spots I encountered over some of the parts and metal lining. I'll tackle that a little later. In the meantime, let's see if we can play a game. Using the most appropriate game to test this Xbox's disk drive with, we see there isn't much point in pursuing the mod till that disk drive gets taken care of. With a simple wipe of the lens and quick wipe down of the surrounding area inside the disk drive, as well as some lithium grease on the rails for good measure, it seems the drive is fully operational again. And do we got a game? We got a game? We got a game! Oh. But of course, I had to do my due diligence and play around with Halo. You know, just to make sure the unit is functioning properly. Ah! Bam! Hi guys! Unfortunately, this is the part of the story where I didn't feel like babysitting a camera while trying to figure out the mod chip soldering process, so most of the footage for the rest of the video will probably be whatever video and photos I had the foresight to take with my phone. And now to continue my story. While the optical drive was working at this point, the rest of the unit was a dusty, rusty, and buggy mess. My original plan for this console was to sell it, so I knew I would have to put in a good amount of elbow grease to justify a nice return. I went to work scrubbing away all the dirt and dust I could find. Even the most tightest of corners, dust, dirt, or rust managed to find a spot to call home. With the dust and dirt tackled as best as I was going to get it, I turned my attention to the rust. I used a scrubbing pad to remove the top layer of rust till I was left with dull, dark spots. From these close-up pictures, it looks like the rust had plenty of time to do what it does best, but with a layer or two of some metallic color spray paint added from a previous project, the end result doesn't look too bad. While I didn't get any footage of it, I went ahead and removed what original thermal paste from the CPU and GPU I could find, and added fresh paste to help with future cooling. Something to note if you plan on replacing the grease in your own unit is to be patient and careful removing the plastic covers over the metal plates so you don't injure yourself or the console. After that, I went ahead and replaced the original fan with a newer one that was reviewed well on Amazon with original Xbox fan replacements. The fan's wiring is a bit long for the length needed, so I just wrapped the excess around the fan and plugged it in that way. But I did need to make the mounting holes a bit bigger by drilling them out so I could use zip ties I already had to tie to the aluminum railing due to the fan size and form factor being different from the OEM fan. Also something to note, if you end up using zip ties, be sure you have them going in the right direction the first time. They were a pain to pull out and try again with. I said earlier that I'd get back to that clock capacitor, so let's get to that. Now this infamous clock capacitor is used to help the Xbox keep track of time during a loss of power. Unfortunately, the reason for the bad cap press is because for most of the Xbox's life, poor quality capacitors were used. The real concern is if the capacitor leaks and the capacitor juice eats away at the board. From what I understand, if you're going to have your Xbox connected to the internet, you don't really need the clock capacitor, but since I wasn't sure if this unit was going to be connected to the internet, I just decided to go ahead and change the cap. Replacements are easily found online, and with a little work I got the original cap removed and replaced with an appropriately colored green cap of similar spec. Now that all the cleaning and maintenance have been taken care of, it's time to get to the main event. The mod chip designed to give new life to this aging console. While there are various mod chips that can be applied to the original Xbox, I went with the Aladdin XT Plus 2 chip. This is the same type of chip I used to mod my first Xbox, so I went with the if it ain't broke approach and used the same type for this mod. Sorry I don't have any install footage to show. This was one of those moments I didn't want to worry about camera maintenance and figuring out what I was doing at the same time. In the most basic of explanations, this little board basically allows the console to boot off of a custom BIOS and thus allows homebrew code to run. After the mod chip was successfully installed, it was time to flash the BIOS chip and configure the software with the console. Oh, and let me tell you about the software. TrueHexen 2021 is the software I use for both of my modded Xbox consoles. It's homebrew software that can easily be downloaded and the ISO burned to a DVD. While easy to get up and running, some headaches I discovered along the way were getting TrueHexen to boot from the disk instead of the console trying to boot into the dashboard. You may have to unplug the console and plug it back in to get the console to read from the disk drive. Next, once you run the BIOS flash program, you can install a new hard drive and initialize it. Then you just need to install some basic applications like DVD to Xbox, so you can rip your Xbox games to the hard drive and whatever dashboard fits your mood. This video isn't going to go into how to do all this because, quite frankly, in my opinion, the TrueHexen software can really try one's patience. If you're serious about Xbox modding, you're going to want to research this software. Because while it does ultimately work, it's easy to get lost with all the software features and there's really no hand-holding here. You're expected to know what you want to do with the software. This led me to actually powering down my console while it was in the middle of setting up my new hard drive because I legit thought it had crashed after partitioning the drives. It can be difficult to tell if the software is actually doing something or if it's legit locked up. Now if you're wondering which replacement drive I went with, I chose this inexpensive Kingston 480GB SSD. I would also attach this 80-wire ribbon cable and a StarTech IDE to SATA converter in order to make the console play nicely with a new drive, and while I could have just duct taped in the SSD and called it a day, I decided to use a spare 3.5 to 2.5 inch hard drive bay converter to nicely house the SSD into the console. I could go on with all the hair pulling I ended up doing to get this mod fully working, but I'll just say I think in the end, part of the problem was my impatience with the software. If I had let it do its thing with the hard drive formatting instead of turning it off due to me thinking that it locked up, I probably would have gotten the results I wanted much faster. Regardless though, I do feel that this is a project that will require patience if it's something you're interested in. Now this video didn't go too in depth about the computer logic and theory behind it, because at the end of the day, I'm just glad I got the thing working. I'd give it up on trying to explain why it works. Ultimately, I'm not trying to review the TrueHexen software in a negative light, because this software is an amazing achievement of reverse engineering that allows us to keep our Xbox consoles going well past their intended lifespan. But again, patience is key with this software. You'll want to research other videos if you're interested in this type of mod work. Finally, my original plan was to sell this modded Xbox, but after seeing all the work I put into it, this one is probably in better overall condition than the first one I modded, so I'll probably end up keeping this one and maybe selling my original modded Xbox. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching.